Here's more of the Alice Stewart Show on 96.5 The Voice.
And we're back 6:44 here in Central Arkansas, breaking down the State of the Union. President Obama giving his fifth State of the Union last night in Washington. And many are reeling about what was not in there. There was no mention of Benghazi. There was no mention of Keystone Pipeline. But what he did talk about certainly gained a lot of attention. Specifically, he did hit on Obamacare, talking about the pros of Obamacare, the benefits of that. And I thought it was interesting that he talked about all of the people who have benefited from Obamacare. There was a woman in the audience that is a recipient of Obamacare. And he says, the president says, that's what health reform is all about. Peace of mind that if misfortune strikes, you have nothing to lose. And he goes through the litany of people who have benefited from this. Because of the Affordable Care Act, more than 3 million Americans under the age 26 have gained coverage under their parents' plan. More than 9 million Americans have signed up for private health insurance or Medicaid coverage. And here's another number he gave emphatically, without a doubt. He said, here's another number, zero. Zero. Because of this law, no American can ever again be dropped or denied coverage for a pre-existing condition like asthma, back pain, or cancer. I thought it was interesting to note how he says zero, no American can be dropped. And then, of course, there's a caveat because there are many people who have been dropped. I want to get the feedback of the State of the Union from Congressman Tom Cotton, who was there in the room. He joins us via the Royal Overhead Door Hotline. Congressman Cotton, great to have you here.
Good morning, Alice. Great to be on with you, as always.
Thank you. I know you have a busy morning, but overall, I've seen some of your feedback, and without a doubt, one of the takeaways from this, as you have noted, is this was nothing more than another speech, another series of broken promises.
Alice, that's right. The president has pursued policies of higher taxes, more spending, and more regulation through laws like Obamacare for 5 years. That's why we have 20 million Americans who are unemployed or underemployed. That's why economic growth is still weak, and that's why wages have been stagnant. And his solution is higher taxes and more spending and more regulation. Just another speech calling for the same tired big government programs that have got us into the situation we are today.
And you, in responding to this, you had mentioned a previous speech that he has said, touting Obamacare, where he very proudly talked about how they preserve the right of Americans to keep this plan. And Congressman, millions upon millions of people have lost their plans, have lost their doctors. This is something that you didn't hear a whole lot about last night.
No, Alice, you didn't. Years ago, the president stood in that very same podium and said, if you like your health care plan, you can keep it. If you like your doctor, you can keep it. We now know that those promises are not true. And the president last night left Obamacare until the very end of his remarks about domestic policy, and he engaged in more misleading facts and figures about that law, which every Arkansan knows is not working and few Arkansans want. He should have instead apologized for misleading the American people to pass such a flawed law and support a repeal of it, or at least some of the bills that we've passed in the House of Representatives to try to protect Arkansans from its harms, like eliminating the tax penalty on Arkansans who don't have health insurance, or allowing people to actually keep their health care plan if they liked it.
I noticed, Congressman, that a lot of the Democrats there that are running for re-election, case in point, Senator Mark Pryor, they didn't run to the aisle to shake his hand, didn't want to have a photo op with him. With the way the Affordable Care Act is going, are we going to see a lot less folks like Senator Mark Pryor going up there and inviting him to their state and being in a situation where they have to be with the president, given the way that Obamacare has rolled out?
Well, it's an election year when endangered Senate Democrats like Mark Pryor won't even be seen in proximity with Barack Obama and issue self-serving statements attacking his speeches when they have been voting in lockstep with him more than 90% of the time over the last 5 years. So I find that reticence a little interesting, and I observed this morning as I was reading the papers, it seems like Senator Pryor's liberal friends from states like Louisiana and North Carolina are also dodging and weaving when it comes to their unwavering support for Barack Obama.
Right. And initial feedback, we talked with Peter Urban from Stevens Media, and he had mentioned that Pryor Senator Pryor did acknowledge there was not a whole lot new, and he was concerned about the tone. And Congressman, one of the key components that folks say about the tone of this was the executive action references he made 4 or 5 times, talking about how he, with or without Congress, I will do this, specifically referring to minimum wage, EPA, also on Second Amendment rights, and then gridlock in Washington. So basically he's saying if Republicans in Washington don't go do as I say, I'm going to do it myself.
It's not surprising. I mean, the president has been acting unilaterally and without legal authority for 5 years now, whether it's delaying the inconvenient parts of Obamacare that would cause him political pain, or refusing to enforce the immigration laws of this country, or using the IRS to target his political adversaries. The only surprising thing is that he thinks he hasn't acted unilaterally enough over the last 5 years.
And do you feel, Congressman, as though with this repeated, we saw this leading up to the State of the Union, he and his top aides talking about I have a pen and a phone and indicating that I'm going to act unilaterally without the help of Congress. What does that do for the mindset of Congress, specifically Republicans, if no matter what you do, he can, in many aspects, not every issue, but many components, he can just go right around your back and do whatever he wants?
Well, it certainly doesn't help foster a spirit of cooperation or collaboration on some of the very real challenges the country faces, whether it's Obamacare or whether it's or a nuclear Iran. And it's not surprising he's been trying to do this for 5 years later and sin based on what the law allows. It's also a reminder to Congress that we shouldn't be passing laws like Obamacare that give so much vast discretion to the president and to his regulatory agencies.
And I want to ask you this, clearly with your being a veteran and having served, I do commend him for his paying tribute to Corey Remsburg, the Army Ranger, and his service, and certainly the sacrifices he has made for our country. But many veterans are concerned what he did not say. There was no mention of reducing the backlog at VAs. There was no mention of military voting rights. And certainly, Congressman, there was no mention of Benghazi. Your thoughts on that?
No, I mean, the president did acknowledge Sergeant Remsburg as kind of a symbol for all veterans and active duty service members. And, of course, we all support our troops who are on the front lines and our veterans. But you're right, the entire foreign policy part of the speech was another sound for retreat and defeat in the world. Unfortunately, that's where he could take more independent action as our commander-in-chief, and that's the one area where he's unwilling to take action, which is to defend our interests in the world and to protect our interest here at home, and whether that's the silence about Benghazi or the continued backlog at the VA or the radical cuts to our military, the president seems least interested in doing that most critical part of his job.
And one more issue that he hit on that I thought was interesting, he tried to continue the dialogue of the war on women and equal pay for women. And do you see this as a sign of things to come, moving closer to the election in November, the Democrats and continuing the dialogue of Republicans and a so-called non-existent war on women in the Republican Party?
Well, the president will engage in whatever kind of demagoguery is necessary to advance his own political agenda. In the 2010 midterm elections, he spoke to a group of Hispanics in, I believe it was Nevada, and encouraged them to go punish their enemies at the polls. Alice, we have enemies who are fighting wars overseas in places like Iraq and Afghanistan. In domestic politics, we certainly have opponents and rivals, but we don't have enemies. We're all Americans. We're all working together to try to make this country better. That kind of rhetoric just goes to show the lengths to which the president will go to win an election.
And one last question, Congressman, with this, with the concerns we have with the Affordable Care Act and with the tone of that speech, I can go it alone, bypass Congress. How do you see that impacting Democrats running for election in November, specifically Senator Mark Pryor?
It's not going to help them. The Affordable Care Act is currently taking people's insurance away. It's driving up their premiums. It's driving up their deductibles. The president can try to take short-term actions to cover his political hide, but in the end, all that does is make the problems of the law even worse. And Senator Mark Pryor and every other Senate Democrat who voted for that law are going to be held accountable for that vote when the American people go to the ballot box in November.
All right. Congressman Tom Cotton, thank you for your thoughts and feedback on the State of the Union, and look forward to talking to you soon.
Thank you.
All right, take care. We're going to take a break, and we'll wrap things up in this first hour of the Alice Stewart Show right after this.
The Alice Stewart Show on 96.5 The Voice.